look like yourself and we love you as you are.
Okay.
It's nice to be able to see and talk to you. I mean, not that I don't talk to you, but
I know. Zoom is amazing.
Baruch Hashem.
Yeah.
Alex, first of all, I would really like to say thank you so much for coming on Drops and for making the effort. I know it's difficult with the baby. And
no problem.
Thank you very much.
So,
and I know
thank you for being flexible.
Excuse me?
And believe it or not, my 2 oldest kids are in quarantine right now due to a COVID exposure. So they are home in case there's a problem.
Oh, wow. So it's even more challenging. So thank you very much.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm going to go over to you to share your amazing story with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for having me here. Joyce reached out to me. This looks like an incredible initiative. My aunt is on the call. Just a shout out to Cynthia Lazarus. My uncle also, Ashley Lazarus, reached out to me telling me all about Drops of Inspiration. And here I am in Cleveland, Ohio, speaking to, wow, 87 women. I'm getting the chills. This Rosh Chodesh Kislev. I'm imagining most people are from Israel, and it's really an honor. I told my kids, be quiet, you can't come downstairs. I'm doing a Zoom class for people in Israel. I just can't believe it. So thank you so much. I have shared this story. Just give me a thumbs up, just to make sure my audio is going well, Joyce. Just want to make sure you can hear me clearly.
Someone's saying there's an echo on the
Echo.
Yes, everyone muted. We're good. Can I continue, Joyce?
There's an echo.
Oh, there's an echo for me?
Yeah.
Okay, I need to get my headphones. Can you give me a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Everybody, please mute yourselves.
When the time comes, we can.
Nine. Wow. Terrific.
Okay.
How is that?
Okay. Alex, unmute yourself, please.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay, how do I sound now? Is that better?
Much better.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I normally do my Zoom classes in the basement, and now I'm upstairs, so there's more of an echo in this room. Okay, so I am going to continue. So I've shared this story to various audiences throughout the United States. And honestly, this was a process, whether or not I should share my personal story. People who know my family know that we're very open, but to, stand up in front of a high school in my community and tell them that, I'm not an FFB, because sometimes it's nice to be undercover, or my father, all the more so, converted to Judaism, was a step that I really needed to take. And the first time I did share this story publicly here in Cleveland was to a group of 7th and 8th grade girls at our high school. And one of the girls came back home to her mother and was telling her all about it. And she loved the story and she was so inspired. And the mom came up to me and said, my daughter really loved your talk. I just can't believe, you're such a Beis Yaakov girl through and through. And on one level, that felt really good, because on one hand, it was sort of I'm mainstream, I made it. I could totally be regarded or taken as just a regular from woman who went through the system. But on the other hand, it made me realize that it's very important when we have stories, and I think all of us have stories, even the FFBs out there, to, in the right place, in the right time, feel comfortable sharing them. Because my experience has been, it has given so many people chizuk to take ownership of their life experiences, whatever they are. And that is why I continue to do what I do. I wrote an article about my story probably about 4 years ago, when that was my first like coming out. Was like a article that anyone could access on the internet. And it was incredible. Like, the one really cool thing about working in journalism and, writing is, especially with online, you just, some things gets posted and it's real time. And there are many ways for your audience to get in touch with you, to share their feedback, which as a writer is like one of the most validating experiences for any of you who read Mishpacha magazine. I am a op-ed columnist there, not a regular one, because it's hard for me to think of things of what to write about. If you have any ideas, you can find me and share with me some inspiration. But for any readers out there, last week, if you read the magazine, I got 2 letters, and I literally like eat this stuff up. It's just so gratifying to hear people's thoughts, their questions, their critiques. That's what makes it worth it for me. So when this piece went out, they I got all of these various like private messages through social media, and people were like, oh, I have a convert in the family, or I am a convert, or I'm a Baal Tshuva. And the title that they put on this article, because the editors write the title, was I don't want to hide my yichus. And really one of the themes of the piece is that this is our yichus. We may not come from Rabbanim, those of us who became from later on, or came from families, parents who became from and made those life choices. But this is our lineage. Those family members who made these choices, or us as individuals who made these choices to connect to Yiddishkeit and start that chain, that is the most remarkable yichus that we need to be proud about, and we need to be proud to share. So that is the beginning of the story, really the end of the story. And the beginning of the story begins with my father's journey. And when I share this with you, I really would like you to think about if there's a person in your life story that made a choice, and because of that person's choice, that is why you are the person you are today. So my father was born during World War II in England, in Dover, England. And he was this was towards the beginning of the war. He was a young child, obviously not Jewish, born to a Methodist family who were very, my father describes them as really having like Judeo-Christian values. My father grew up with Bible stories, a principled type of life. And he tells the story of being a young war child. Of course, everything was very heavily rationed, and he would remember very vividly, and he still does today, and he tells the story much better than I do, when they would start to hear a rumble down the street, and all the kids would run out of their homes, and there would be these big Jeeps that were army green with white stars on the hood, and they would drive by their homes, and in the Jeeps were these men with big white sparkly pearly smiles, who would be smiling and laughing and bantering amongst each other. So of course, we know these were the American GIs that were driving through the neighborhood. And the kids would rush after these tanks. And he remembers one vivid moment where it was rushing up the hill, and he and his friends were rushing up, and they would yell out loud, "Gadani gum chum, gadani gum chum," to these men in the Jeeps. Well, what does that mean, got any gum chum? Well, got any gum, like got any chewing gum or candy, chum, guy. And that was like their line, got any gum chum, got any gum chum. And indeed, what they would do is these troops would stand up, and he remembers them parking at the top of a hill, and they would throw these candies outside to the children below. And red, yellow, orange, circle candies that the kids then would grab, scramble all along on the ground. And what were they? Well, these were the classic, iconic lifesavers, American candies. And it was such a treat for these poor children. Not only, of course, was this a treat, but for my father, he really felt an affinity to these soldiers, these American GIs. And that message that he got from them, was these are people. there's something about these people that I want to go to the place that they came from, whether or not it was a subconscious message, but that was sort of a message that he had as a young child that carried through his entire life, that he one day needed to go there. Of course, there is America. So the process to him getting to America was first he, in terms of a religious, spiritual level, he sort of doubted religion. At one point, he was a Methodist lay preacher. Then he gave up the church and did the classic, backpacking throughout Europe, excuse me, not Europe, backpacking throughout Asia, and, exploring the Far Eastern religions. And then ultimately he sort of settled on being an agnostic. And that's where he was throughout his, 20s in terms of his religious identity. Interestingly enough, the moment that he met my mother, I would argue maybe was his first real spiritual experience. Wouldn't it be so easy in Shidduchim if we had spiritual experiences when we met the right one? Doesn't always work that way, but for my father, who we joke around is spiritually sensitive, as you will see in his story, there were lots of those types of experiences that helped him make the right decisions. Anyway, he was in England. His brother moved to South Africa. And his brother called him and he said, "You have to come visit me in South Africa. It's so beautiful." And my father didn't want to go. At the end of the day, he convinced my father, "Come." So he gets on a plane, he goes, and he meets my uncle, his brother, at a party, an outdoor party. If anyone's been to South Africa or familiar with a very beautiful country, this was in
I
Durban.
can't, I've made you a co-host. Could you please mute everybody? Alex,
Okay, should I continue?
can you please mute everybody? I've made you co-host and I can't see you. Can you just?
Let me see if I can. I'm going to see if I can mute everyone. It says mute all.
No, there's
Okay.
Esther Hirsch and a few others that have.
Okay, there's one person in the waiting room. I was able to mute everyone.
Excellent. Because I handed you.
Okay, so I'll keep going.
Okay, great. Sorry.
Okay, so no problem. So he's at this picnic in Durban overlooking the ocean on a hill, like very beautiful. And he notices there's this woman there, very tall, long, dark, black hair. And he immediately felt this connection to her. And visually, she looked very different than the typical British, blonde, fair woman that he was used to dating. By the way, at this time, he was an advertising executive, an advertising art director working in London, really up there. And he was really fascinated by her. So he went up to her, started talking. And the first thing he noted was her dark, deep brown eyes. And he felt like his neshama was sort of leaping out into her eyes. He felt this immediate connection with her on this level through her eyes. Now, the fascinating thing we know is in Yiddishkeit, the eyes are the window to the neshama. He must have sensed that. They were talking, and before they knew it, they were dating, and before they knew it, that was it. They knew they wanted to get married. Now you may be asking, wait a minute, I'm calling this advertising art director from London. She's a guy, how is this happening? She's Jewish, of course, I'm Jewish through my mother. So what happened is she was raised in South Africa. She went to a convent, and there were only a few other, believe it or not, it sounds weird when I say only a few other Jewish kids, but there were a couple other Jewish kids who went to this convent. It was the best education. Her mother was sort of a self-hating type of Jew, really struggled with her own Judaism, but they had Friday night, quote unquote, Shabbos with candlelighting because it was South Africa. You went to an Orthodox shul, believe it or not, she has memories going to an Orthodox shul sitting separately behind a mechitza, but that, not mechitza, the balcony, it was different. It was South Africa, it was a completely different world, especially then. But she went to this convent. She remembers the only real thing besides that cultural Friday night, she remembers her father telling her, never bring home a guy. And here she was, the one thing she knew about religion. She says she remembers her mother sticking forks in the ground, in the dirt. That's all her memories were, no values. And now she's bringing home a guy. So she brought her guy home, and her father, my grandfather, said, raised this point up to her. And she said, well, listen, like, what do you expect? You know, this is how I was raised with nuns. Shouldn't be such a big surprise if I bring home this Christian guy. And ultimately he gave them their blessing. He saw that he was a good guy and moving on. But my father still had his dream to move to America. Don't know how, but he convinced her that they were going to move to America. They moved to New York City. My father got a job on Madison Avenue in art direction and advertising. And then the next thing, I'm born. I was born on the Upper East Side, and now they have a child. And sort of a gnawing feeling, never expressed by my mother, but expressed at a certain point by my father was, well, how are we going to raise this child? My father would say, I grew up with a, strong identity, religious identity. I always believed in God. I prayed, even though he was not necessarily practicing at that time. He felt it was important to raise a child with religion. And, they never decided. That wasn't brought up on their dates. But now that they had a child, they would need to make a decision. So the moment came when he realized. And as he explains, I was sitting in my high chair in the apartment on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. And my father had this urge to turn around and take a look at me. And he looked at me and he stared straight into my dark brown Jewish eyes. And he knew. And he turned around and he said to my mother, that's it. She's a Jew. She's Jewish. And my mother said, huh? He's like, we are raising this child as a Jewish girl. And my mother said, well, it's actually interesting you say that, because I do know that according to Yiddishkeit and according to Judaism, the religion is passed down through the mother. So she is Jewish. And my father said, well, I don't know about that, but I know that this is a Jewish child. And that was it. So of course we wonder, well, what does that actually mean? How they were going to raise me as a Jew. And for the next 10 years, it was basically an experiment. I'm an only child, so it's just me. And we all know that we sort of experiment on our children. Things go right, things go wrong. So this is a big experiment. How do you raise a child to be Jewish when you don't even know what that means? Don't know anything about Jewish education? Trial and error. Once my parents moved to Atlanta when I was 3, my mother wanted to enroll me in a preschool. Actually, she was like, listen, knowing that I was Jewish, she thought in her mind, no, mom, like, you do any better? She thought, I went to a convent, I was raised in a Catholic system. Let's try like a Catholic school for her. It's like the best education. Let's just like my experience was. And she said she went for an interview at one of these prep schools and walked in the door and opens up the double doors, and right in front of her was a crucifix, like staring at her in the face. And she turned around. She's like, no, can't do it. Another time as a young child, my father was getting nostalgic about Christmas. Now, please let me remind you, we were a multicultural family. This was, in the 80s. You bet we had Christmas and you bet we had Hanukkah. We had both. And that was very normal to me. I didn't think there was anything wrong with that. I loved Christmas, loved Halloween. I have very vivid memories and pictures that I will not share with you. But the funny thing is we would invite Sarah Stein, the Jewish girl down the block, to help decorate the Christmas tree. And I would save the angel for Sarah to put on the top, because that is what you do. It's like, multicultural. So, but one year he was getting a little bit more nostalgic, as it probably, you could imagine, very easy for someone to be nostalgic around Christmas time with all the carols on the radio and Christmas trees everywhere. So he said, let's just go to church, like first mass service. I don't even know if that's what it's called, but for the service, the night of Christmas. And my mom was like, okay. she had done so much like for my father in terms of, hosting these holiday parties and, fine, let's do that. I will never forget. I must have been 6 years old or 7, sitting in the pew at that church service. And my mother was very, very uncomfortable. And they left early. And I think both of these examples are my mother's neshama crying out. It was sort of like a red flag. It was a boundary that she could not pass. The first one, walking into that prep school with the cross, and the second one actually going into a church. It moved beyond, the cultural stuff into ritual, and that she was not prepared to do. Around this time period, my mother's brother started getting interested in Orthodox Judaism. He himself also went to a Catholic, a convent, a Catholic school, and through various experiences started exploring his own Judaism. He, his daughter married in an Orthodox ceremony. I'll talk about that soon later. And my father started getting intrigued by my uncle's journey and would ask my uncle about Judaism. I will say that one piece of the story, which I will not share, is my father did have really a life and death experience where he had a ruptured appendix and pneumonia. I was a young child and literally was on his deathbed. Baruch Hashem, he survived that. But during that, he did have some realizations about how he needed to change his life, and one of which was religion. So my uncle was, like, listen, he's a very generous person. You're interested in Judaism? Fine. He went to West Side Judaica on the Upper West Side in New York and would just buy out the store and would pack up these UPS boxes filled with Jewish books, the Art Scroll Siddur, the Hirsch Chumash, all of the To Be a Jew by Donin, lots of classics. If someone was interested in Judaism and they were reaching out to you, what would be your favorite books? And that's what he put in this box, and he would send them to my father, and my father would sit and read front to back. His favorite was the Art Scroll Siddur. The Art Scroll Chumash hadn't come out yet. This was like late 80s, like maybe even 1990, and the Hirsch Pentateuch. So, and he would read these, especially Rav Hirsch, and it was literally, he said, just reminders of truths that he had always known his entire life. He was just tapping into it, and it just, like, values and things that he always felt were true to him and how he had always lived his life by were being reflected in the words of Rav Hirsch on the Chumash. And he just wanted more. Now, of course, my uncle wasn't trying to proselytize or convert him, but really, I think this was key just in terms of responding to my father's initial interest. So that really began a journey for him, which I'll continue in a moment. I'm going to take a brief pause and just share with you. I talked about the Christmas trees and talked about as a child, like this grand experiment of like, how do you raise a kid Jewish when you don't really even know what that means and still have one parent who's Christian and one parent that's Jewish. I just find it like so fascinating. Like, we're so careful as from Jews with our children's chinuch. And like here, it was just completely a free for all. And you would think, like, how did that affect me as a child? So I think one major incident when I realized I was absolutely, utterly confused was when it was holiday time in 5th grade. I was in a public school, and an announcement was made on the PA. It was Hanukkah that had come before Christmas that year, and the Jewish kids should come to the office and pick up their Hanukkah presents because the school would give out books for all the children during the holidays. And I remember at recess on the field discussing with my friends, should I pick up the Hanukkah present or should I wait until Christmas? Ultimately, the question was, what am I? It was a moment of trying to define my identity. Was I a Jew or was I a Christian? And I am telling you, when I had to choose, because it was always sort of both fuzzied in my mind, when I had to choose, I did not know what to do. And ultimately, I don't remember what I chose. I do have a recollection of my friends saying, oh, you're Jewish, go get the Hanukkah present, and thinking, I really don't even know if that's even true. I'm not even sure if I am Jewish. And I don't blame my parents whatsoever. This is my journey that I am so proud of, and I would not be here today without this journey, and that's why I'm sharing it with you. But it really is fascinating. When I was in 1st grade, my parents put me into a Jewish day school, a community school, because my mother also was thinking about her Shabbat memories. And I would come home with the challahs and talk about Shabbat, and my mother freaked out. Okay, how could I raise her? We're not doing this at home. We're not. How could I put her through this if we're not going to have Shabbat? And she pulled me out. So there was a lot of sort of confusion around this. Ultimately, my father started learning more about Judaism more formally after he was, doing his own self-study. He got involved with the Chabad in Atlanta. One piece that I always remember is him going to these classes at Chabad, and typical shiur with the Chabad rabbi with their 10 people sitting in the room. And he would say, why is this room not packed with people? You're sharing the secrets of the universe. Why are there not more people to listen to this? And that rabbi must have just loved that. What a receptive person in his share. He thought he was like literally exploring the universe. He heard about this shul called BJ, Beth Jacob. Now we had explored when my father started getting interested. First, he went to conservative synagogue, didn't like that the rabbi was talking about politics from the pulpit all the time. Then he switched to reform, left reform, even though the reform rabbi actually had a chavrusa with one of the rabbis from the Kollel, actually, from Beth Jacob, the Orthodox shul in Atlanta. But he was like, my father wanted there to be services on Saturday morning. And he asked the rabbi, like, Friday night's beautiful, but let's have more. And he's like, oh, well, we don't get enough people to come. Everyone's off to their soccer and shopping and movies, and no one comes. So my father knew that there's something wrong with that. Like, Judaism needs to be a lifelong affair. It can't just be one.
Alex, we've lost you.
Night, and then you're done for the week. He understood that he was learning enough about Judaism that so we started going to Beth Jacob. You may have heard about Beth Jacob. This is Rabbi Emanuel Feldman, who columnist in Mishpacha magazine, but not his fame, not his claim to fame. He started Beth Jacob, this Orthodox synagogue, back in the 1950s. And then once my father started going, Rabbi Emanuel was sort of on his way out, passing the torch to his son, Rabbi Alon Feldman. So he would go, and, it was Orthodox, but he loved it. Like, he loved the intensity of the davening, and he would come home and he would try to talk to my mother about it, and she wasn't interested. And then he was like, Shabbos, idea. And he'd tell my mother, you know what? Let's one night a week sit down and have a family meal together where we're not rushing off to the mall. And then next week he'd come back with some flowers, and my mother knew what he was doing. But slowly, we started on our own, our Friday night. My father would go to Beth Jacob for a davening on Shabbos, and my mother was not interested. My mother's a product of the 1970s, very much a feminist, had a lot of preconceived notions about Orthodoxy and Orthodox women. And yeah, she married the non-Jew. Remember, she's not interested in Orthodox Judaism. You've got to be kidding me. Well, there was a turning moment for her, and that was my cousin's wedding. That is Cynthia Lazarus, her daughter Tracy's wedding. I was, I want to say 10 years old. I was a flower girl. And we went up to New York. And at that wedding, my uncle wanted us to meet the Stashover Rebbe. My uncle, very connected with different Rebbes in New York. And he wanted us to go get a bracha from the Rebbe. What do we know, So we go off to Williamsburg, and we get in. My uncle was connected, so we get in to have this one-on-one with the Stashover Rebbe, who we sat at the table. He looked us straight in the eye. 90-something-year-old Rebbe Alav Shalom, without any glasses, blue sparkling eyes. And he said to my father, when you convert, you will have 7 blessings waiting for you. And my father said, what do you mean when? I said, I'm converting. He hadn't made any decisions just yet. He said, when you convert. And he said a few other things, but one of the things he would say is his grandfather was a Noam Elimelech. And as he was talking to us, he would say, my grandpappy's telling me, you better believe it. I'm getting some, Siyata Dishmaya direct line right now, telling you this is what's going to happen. It was really incredible. Also a moment that I will never forget. And my father said, when he saw the Rebbe look into my mother's eyes, it was this spiritual lightning, this energy. Now, let me just mention, do not have spiritual moments in my life like this. The genes did not get passed down to me. This is my father's very special gift. My mother, we leave this meeting. We walk into the dreary winter streets of Williamsburg with the women, pushing their triple strollers, and, not South Africa, where what my mother is used to. And I'm going to mute everyone because I think what's happening is when new people come in, they are not muted. Okay, there we go. Hopefully that works. So this is not South Africa. If you can picture the scene for all of you who have been to Williamsburg Borough Park. And my mother looked out and she said, I've come home. And I always say, no, they did not become Hasidish. No. If you know my parents, they did not. But ultimately, she knew that she had spiritually come home. And she knew that she had come home to her Judaism. And she always says that there were like rooms in her soul that she had kept locked. And this experience really enables her to slowly open up those rooms of her own Jewish identity, of her own neshama. So when we came back to Atlanta, it was sort of like, we're going this full speed ahead. And my mother started coming to Beth Jacob and started sitting on the other side of the Mechitza. Beth Jacob is a very welcoming, warm, the shuls look very different, I'd imagine, than the ones in Ramat Beit Shemesh. Not that those are not welcoming and warm, but if you can imagine a woman in 1990, post the 70s feminist movement, who was an incredibly accomplished professional, who was then being told that she needed to sit behind a sheet for davening, that was not going to work. And this shul was kiruv oriented. So it's a big circle shul that had a mechitza running down the middle. So really when you were sort of facing the middle, which is the bima, and the men were facing also. And you could see everything that was going on. And so essential, of course, the Rabbanim there, Rabbi Feldman, of course, got, a sock that this is completely fine, because if they had it any other way, I will tell you right now that we would not be here. I would not be talking to you. Like there's no question that welcome to send in. And Beth Jacob, you should just know, diverging for a minute, about 10 years ago, people wanted the mechitza to be changed. They felt that it needed to be higher. It needs to be like, a more substantial mechitza. And Rabbi Feldman always said, I will only change this mechitza if that's what my congregation wants. And he even resisted for a while. And because the shul had moved in a different direction, and so many Baalei Teshuva had gone through, they ended up changing the mechitza. I'm sure it's still very warm and beautiful, welcoming, but it's fascinating. Anyway, slowly, my father started getting more interested, and he reached out to Rabbi Alon Feldman and said, well, I want to make a meeting. Like, I want to convert. He was 54 years old at this time. Actually, he converted at 54. So this is a couple years older. At this point, I was in 5th grade. So Rabbi Alon, of course, pushed him off 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. My father didn't know why he was pushing him off. It's just this disorganized rabbi. You can't make a meeting with me, come back. And by the third meeting that they had, Rabbi Feldman said he hadn't decided if he wanted to convert my father. His father, Rabbi Alon Feldman, had some negative experiences converting people who stopped being from. And, he was warned. Rabbi Alon Feldman was young. I mean, he must have, been in his 30s at this point, maybe, and wasn't sure. But the final meeting, Rabbi Alon said he hadn't decided yet. And before he knew it, he stood up and he said, I'm compelled to convert you. And that was it. And he always said, I find it fascinating. Why do you want to convert? You're 54 years old. It's not like you have some mother-in-law that's pushing you to convert to marry her daughter. What is it? And that was because my father was so sincere that he was willing to, he once said to my mother, I'm doing this. And they had a wonderful marriage. I am doing this. Either you're coming or you're not. Not as a divorce threat, but really, I'm sharing this with you to indicate like this was who he had to be. It was literally a question of identity. And once that happened, lots about our life had to change. We had to move into the community. At this point, we were like a half an hour away. I needed to be switched out of public school. And I was switched into Torah Day School of Atlanta. It literally was in a strip shopping center in those days. Like Tuesday morning was next door. I mean, can you contrast this to like the prep school education that my mother thought I was going to have? And then the public school I went to was the top public school in my area. And what they sacrificed to change their life to me is just remarkable. There's very difficult decisions that they needed to make. Putting me into a school, I had like 10 girls in my class. And when I was younger, when I was like about 4th grade, I would say, I don't know why I said this. I don't want to reform bat mitzvah. They put me in before I really had gotten into that pressurizing reform conservative bar bat mitzvah scene. I think it might have been a little bit harder once I hit the teenage years, but they got me in the best time. And I remember the teacher there made a pizza party for me to meet all of the girls that would be in my class. And, I could just tell you, I have 5 kids. My oldest is now a 12th grader. I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but I still remember that. Like, that was a turning point for me so that I could be accepted socially. And so I would want to switch into the school, as I just all of a sudden had all these friends that I had met at this pizza store who were so excited that I was joining their class. So we had to move. My parents sold their house at a loss. They did whatever they needed to do. I'm gonna mute everyone again. Sorry, just the sound is starting to bother me when I hear people talking, but it's not their fault. Let me do this one more time. Okay. So major sacrifices. When I was in 5th grade, before we had moved into the community, 2 fascinating things happened. Number one, my mother tells me when she had driven up to Chick-fil-A, I think it was Chick-fil-A, to get her usual chicken sandwich for lunch. They hadn't officially anything yet. So she was like, it's fine. Like one more, my last sandwich. She ordered her sandwich, took a bite, spit it out. Like, that's it. Couldn't eat this anymore. And one other story is my parents put me in this acting camp in 5th grade with the local theater. And I loved it. I loved acting. And by the way, when I had moved on from school, I always was in the plays, and I wrote the play one year and always explored that, that interest of mine. But at the end of this camp, we performed performance. So the parent, everyone was there. And at the end of the performance, the director of the camp came up to my mother and said, actually, I don't know if you know this, but this camp is actually a feeder for our theater company. We like to identify the stars from the campers, and they then become, our child actors in our troupe. And we wanted to know if your daughter, we would like to do this. And would you like your daughter to be enrolled in this? And my mother was like, wow. Flattered. But at that point, again, we had not even moved into Orthodox community. Her next question was, well, when are the practices? Saturday. And she turned around and said, I'm sorry. She said, we're observant Jews, and I won't be able to sign her up. We keep Shabbos. Now, unbelievable, unbelievable, changing the direction of your child's life. Did she ask me? I don't think she ever asked me. I'm not sure what I would have said, but just unbelievable. Even not being they were not from, she knew they were all in. She knew that this was not, it was just a simple choice. Anymore. This is not the life that we're leading anymore. Before community opens up their arms, just totally welcomed us. We were invited to Shabbos meals all the time. And one year we had a Pesach Seder, we were invited to a family. And even though my mother was all in, you bet she still had her struggles. Just because you become from even doesn't mean that your struggles go away. It's a lifelong journey. But at this point, my father already was, he was going to convert. We're still learning about the community. So this Pesach meal was like a great Pesach Seder, not to send anyone who might be becoming religious to, like the anti-Kiruv Pesach Seder. So we get there. The husbands at the
Alex, you're freezing up.
Stack of Haggadahs next to him, and he's just going through them one at a time, drowning, nodding off, and falling asleep at the table. And the husband was elbowing her to wake up. And my mother was watching this, horrified, absolutely horrified. She was thinking, right?
Alex,
now my father on the other hand
you're freezing.
What?
You're freezing up.
Okay. It might be my internet.
A slight backtrack. You froze.
Okay. I'm going to keep talking. Just give me a thumbs up or thumbs down as I speak, okay?
Okay.
So at the Seder, he's eating his matzah and his eyes are closed and he's clearly having a lot of kavanah. Okay, he's not a Jew, he's a non-Jew. Clearly having a lot of kavanah eating his matzah, thinking about something. We have no clue what. Anyway, it's like 2:30 in the morning. We get in the car. We drive to our neighborhood 30 minutes away. My mother is fuming, and she starts like you could see, like she's about to explode. But my father says, Beverly, I literally was eating the matzah, and it was like the dust of Egypt in my mouth. And he's going on about this spiritual experience that he was having eating his matzah, where he was back in Egypt. Now I laugh. Now we all know that like the whole purpose of the Seder is that you should be reenacting Yetzias Mitzrayim. Like that is like the ultimate spiritual level. It's as if Hashem took you out of Egypt. And this was his first Seder. And I think his neshama was like very tuned in that is literally what he was feeling. Like he was feeling like he was leaving Mitzrayim, eating the dust of Egypt in his mouth. And my mother was broiling, and then she let it all out. And she's like, did you see that wife? She was being treated like a servant. She should have been a slave in Egypt. And, all of the feminists.
You're frozen.
And, yelling, like letting it all out, why this is awful. She's like, and if you wear tzitzit, she said, I will divorce you. So that's a divorce threat. And yes, indeed, my father wears tzitzis and my mother's wears a sheitel, and they are happily married. How did she overcome this? So she overcame this because she met a lot of amazing frum women. And I really I'm going to use this as a shout out to every single one of you, just being who you are. And it doesn't mean that you have to look perfect all the time to be an amazing frum woman because some not religious person is looking at you and making some observation. Really sincere, growth-oriented frum women, real people who literally shattered so many, or all of, her preconceived notions about Orthodox women. Now, of course, this is real life. There are going to be some people that turn you off, but it is those role models. And I think I've always believed in the power of role models that enable. So at this point, I was switched to, I'm so sorry, I have some work going on in my house if you're hearing a
You're frozen.
But at this point, the banging, I'm so sorry. I don't know if you hear it. Anyway, at a Jewish school, and things are going pretty well. My father at that point already had decided to convert. A very special time because my mother. Oh, okay, I'll go back. My mother had told my father. When they got married in South Africa, they were married by a justice of the peace. It was a non-religious ceremony. And she said at her 20th wedding anniversary, she wanted a real wedding. That is exactly what happened. That weekend was Friday, is when he got converted, when he had his, the mikvah, and he had his bris, because there's a symbolic bris. Shabbos day was his ufruf, and Sunday was his wedding. So I'm going to share with you exactly what I'm talking about. Here they were 20 years later. I'm going to, can we all see that?
No.
Oh, you can't. I forgot to press share my screen, and I can go back and do that. Oh man, where did I go? Here it is. I'm sorry. Okay, here we go. Here it is. Okay, so here they were 20 years. Do you see it?
Yep.
Okay, that's their wedding.
Amazing.
And here they are 20 years later. That's
Wow.
Rabbi Alon Feldman. You can see he was so young. I was their bridesmaid.
Wow.
They made a real wedding. I forgot to show this to you before. This is me and my grandmother, my mother's parents, when I was little, the old life. And here I was, the bridesmaid, literally walking. There's a mechitza, if you can see it. I was walking down the aisle. And it's the real chuppah. And they made a real Jewish wedding. And they invited the whole community, and the community celebrated and danced. And all of these families that had invested so much in us, who really brought us into their family, they joined, and people gave my parents wedding gifts, rabbis. One gave, like a besamim for Havdalah and a challah cover and things that my parents didn't necessarily have, but to build their new Jewish home.
Wow.
So you may wonder, that little girl, like, how did I transition? I transitioned pretty well. I did struggle. And by the way, we're going to go for a full hour in case you're wondering. I did struggle a little bit with, catching up on my skills with Hebrew. And that was hard, even though I had some Sunday school education, but obviously it would be hard jumping into Jewish day school. And for me, in terms of my own growth, everything became real for me in 8th grade when I was invited to an NCSY Shabbaton. NCSY, senior NCSY begins in 9th grade. And in 8th grade, the junior NCSY kids get invited to the senior NCSY Shabbatons. And I mentioned the word role model before, because that is what NCSY was for me. I joined a Shabbaton with kids from all around my region, Southern NCSY, from kids. Like I had my little class. I ended up going to a co-ed yeshiva high school where we were 10 from kids and a class of 50 kids, where other kids were Reform conservative. And I just didn't have enough of a broad exposure from life through peers. And that's what NCSY did to me. It showed me oh, this is a frum girl who's dressed tzniusly, wearing a skirt. Holding her own siddur and she's davening. I know it sounds so fundamental, but for me, it was you could be cool and you could be frum. And over the years in high school, I got more and more involved in NCSY. I ended up going on an NCSY summer learning program, Mechlelet NCSY. It's on the Neve campus, the summer of 11th grade. Huge ramification.
Alex, you're freezing.
The best of the best of so into learning, so into davening, and we're normal, because guess what? In high school, for me, we were the orthodorks. That's what they would call us. We would laugh about it. We were dorky, not because of how we dressed, because of the fact that we were frum. And to stand up from our lunch table, to walk to the other end of the cafeteria to wash for bread, took such courage. It was like a walk of shame. You were standing up and showing people that you cared about washing for bread. And that was my whole high school. But guess what? For me, it was this is the new life that we've chosen as a family, because it was a journey that we were all taking together. And why would I want to do something that Reform and conservative people do? So when my frum friends started getting into trouble, because you can imagine what a challenging environment that is, I would be well, no, I don't want to go and do XYZ, which I will not share with you, because that's what not religious kids do. And why would I go backwards? I'm moving forwards in my journey. So the whole way I viewed everything in high school was, this was a journey, and I was moving forward. I wasn't moving backwards. And anytime I had a question, challenging that, that it was always very clear to me. And, I caught up on my skills on Mechlelet. I really was able to hold my own, learning. And I went to seminary. I went to Darchei Bina. Actually, I remember at Darchei Bina, they knew I was not where their typical applicants were, but that made me push. So I remember the Naomi class. Are you still not hearing me?
You're freezing on and off.
Okay. Move rooms, because I'm gonna go. Okay, I don't know what the state of this room looks like, so. All right, I'm hoping this works. What?
Fine, great, okay.
Okay, yeah. I forgot my paper, but it's okay. I'm so sorry about the technical difficulties. Okay, look, just give me a thumbs up if you think this is better. So yeah, I remember in seminary, I remember it was, I don't remember, I think it was a Naomi, or it was some class. And it was a Ramban. And I remember translating something super well and out loud in front of everyone. And the rabbi was like, Alex, you did it. He understood that this was a journey for me. He understood wow, she got there, she did it. So you may be wondering what happened next. And before I tell you a little bit about myself, because I have 10 more minutes, and what journey I went on to where I am today, I do just want to share with you the end of my father's story. The circle of his story, where everything came full circle, was at his Afraf. And at his Afraf, as we know, what typically happens is for a chassan is the next thing you know, he looks up and you've got candies all around you. And that's exactly what happened. He looks up and there's red, yellow, green candies all around him. And he realized this is full circle. This is why he came to America, to be the person who he was always meant to be an American, and not just to be an American, but America was the place where he would become a Jew. And that is the end of that beautiful story. So yeah, it's really remarkable. I'm gonna show you now back to my screen. I personally went on to college. I went to Stern College, and here you see the chuppah here, and here's my chuppah. That's us, my husband, Dale.
Beautiful.
Let's just run through some pictures here. It's a beautiful picture. We don't look like that anymore. That was like almost 20 years ago. So how that happens is also a full circle story, where when I was beginning to start dating, we didn't know very much. We were like very out of town, right? We didn't know shidduchim. I was so proud always of my father being a convert, but we didn't really get the real world that like not everyone necessarily is going to be embracing that. So at one point when I was in college, a friend of mine was like, "Oh, I have a great guy. I'm going to set you up with him." And we didn't know what we were doing. Fine, get me on we had a phone call. Like we didn't do a background check. We didn't do no references. I'm talking to this guy, and little naive me tells him over the phone, "Oh, my father converted." First of all, you don't like share your whole life story over the phone, like I didn't know what I was doing. But thank God I told him, because he said, "Oh, wow, that might be a problem. I'm a Kohen." And I didn't know this, but apparently a Kohen cannot marry the daughter of a convert. And that launched me into literally an identity crisis, where I was like, what's wrong with me? I'm Jewish. My mother's Jewish. I don't have any non-Jewish blood in me. Why can't I marry a Kohen? So my uncle sent me everywhere. He got me on the phone with Rav Willig from YU to like explain the halachic ramifications, which I'm sure I did not understand then, and I probably wouldn't understand now. So I always sort of had this like chip on my shoulder that developed a little bit later, where I was like, what? Like, am I damaged goods? Like, am I really not Jewish? Like, I wanted to be 100% fully Jewish, because I was, right? So when the shidduch was suggested with my husband, actually a friend of mine from high school who was a boy, because we went to NCSY together, I went to a co-ed high school, he like firmed out, and he ended up in Ner Yisrael, and my husband was in Ner Yisrael, and he like sat at a meal with him, and he's like, "Oh, I have a girl for you," My husband was dating someone else at the time, turned out from a family friend who also made the shidduch. Just a few months later, he was available. And when I had spoken, by the way, to this first friend, who of course we hadn't spoken to each other in years, like he was in Ner Yisrael, and I was like, "Is he by any chance a Baal Tshuva? Like, I'm just curious, not that I need that, but just curious." And, "Oh, no, he's not a Baal Tshuva. No. Well, of course he was a Baal Tshuva, and he only been from for like 3 years, but he like did it so well that you couldn't even tell," which I appreciated. But when we ended up before we got engaged, my husband was just wondering, like, is there anything he needed to know because of the fact that my father wasn't Jewish? So he picked up the phone and called Rabbi Ilan Feldman. And Rabbi Ilan Feldman said, "Danielle, you have nothing to worry about. There's nothing you need to be concerned about." He said, "I would marry her off to my own son." And when my husband later told me that, it just felt so good, right? Because we always sort of have this, a little bit of, I don't know, I'm not exactly sure how to define what the term is, but, imposter syndrome or questioning our validity at times, and made me feel really like I had come full circle. Speeding past that, got married, moved to Baltimore. Had finished up my master's in Jewish education, and I got an undergraduate degree before in English. So I always wanted to teach. I wanted to do both. And I got my dream job teaching at a community school in Baltimore, where I was able to teach English and the Limudei Kodesh classes in a middle school. We were there for 9 years, 5 of which my husband was learning in the Kollel in Ner Yisrael. He decided to go to medical school. I continued to support him, not just in Kollel, but then to medical school, throughout medical schools. we moved to Cleveland for his residency here at Case Western University Hospitals, and we've stayed. Now we've been here for almost 10 years. So, you know, I'm going to show you some pictures. This was my son's, oh, sorry, I got to go back, and I will wrap it up because I appreciate all of your time. Share
Fine.
screen.
Fascinating.
I'm sure I left out some things because I left my paper in the other room, but it's okay. Okay, this is my son's bar mitzvah a few years ago. That's Levi, Chana, Tzvi, and Meira, and my parents.
Well done.
And most recent picture of our family. This is in quarantine. This is our new addition, Gabrielle. There was like a thing, sort of a fad to do front doorstep photographs during quarantine. So like the photographer could stand far away and take your pictures. So that's what we did.
Beautiful.
And here they are. Levi's looking into yeshivas for Israel for next year. And I'm going to close with my journey at Mishpacha. This looks sort of weird. There's my picture underneath the word Mishpacha. Like, have you ever seen that before? So this was a couple years ago when I started writing for them. This was like my goal. Like, I've been teaching. I taught when we moved to Cleveland. I taught English in the Beis Yaakov here, like the more yeshivish Beis Yaakov. And then I moved to teaching English at a different high school to get a tuition break. And then I was involved in starting a new girls' high school here. I'm passionate about girls' education. Now I'm home and doing my writing and staying home with my baby. But my goal was always to write for Mishpacha, and I didn't want to write for family first. I wanted to write for the main Mishpacha because I wanted to have a voice where the entire community was listening, and not just women, but to deal with communal issues and to share that with everyone. And I knew that the op-ed section of Mishpacha was the place. So I pitched out to Shoshana Freeman, the editor, and one of the more seasoned columnists basically said, before I reached out to Shoshana Freeman, you know what, like, you got to climb the ropes. You got to earn your stripes, you know, like, who are you? How much have you written? I had written for a bunch of places, but I will tell you, and his guidance to me, it completely turned me off and it scared me. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm a nobody. I can't just like write for a Mishpacha magazine. Like, who am I? And I didn't. And for like 6 months, I did nothing until a mentor of mine inspired me and said, what do you mean? You can't give up, try again. And I just literally cold emailed Shoshana Freeman and was like, listen, you know, here's some writing samples. This is what I want to do. And the next thing I knew, she's like, here's your spot. So it's like Jonathan Rosenblum, Eitan Kobri, and little Alexandra Fletcher that no one knows what she looks like, except when you go onto the website, when they decided to start including pictures of women on the website, someone shared this picture with me, like, Alex, look at you. I was cracking up. This is the talk that I did here with Ruchi Fryer and Sivan Rahav Meir. She's an Israeli journalist, I'm sure you know. We had spoken at SKA, a girls' school, at like a Yom Yom a couple years back. And that picture was on my social media account, and Mishpacha took it off of my social media account. So we laugh about this. Like, the first picture that they use of women, even though it's online, is me with my name under their logo. I still laugh today. And here we are. And I encourage you to take a look at the mishpacha.com website. If you are curious about your your favorite female writers, here they are. You can see what they look like. And there I am. And I'm thrilled that they have made that adjustment to feature pictures of women on their website, because the bottom line is, if you have internet in your house, your husband's have seen a woman before. Hopefully that's all they've seen. They've seen a picture of a woman. You don't need to worry. So I'm thrilled with this development. And that is where that's the story. That's the story of way back here and way back here. And I'd like to just open up to questions if you would like to stay on the call a little bit longer. Let me stop sharing my screen. If anyone has any questions for me, I'd be happy to take any questions.
That's an incredible story. Incredible. And thank you for sharing. Ladies, Alex is open for questions if you're ready.
Can you show the picture of your family with your parents?
Sure.
It's amazing.
I'm gonna find it. You know what? For years, when I share this story, I've been wanting to do pictures, and you're the first one that I've done with pictures. And I think it makes it so much more real.
Wow.
This was a while back.
That's
This
your
is
father.
Levy's
It's
now 17. Yeah, my father, if you know my father and my mom.
It's amazing, amazing.
Thank you.
They have a lot of Yiddish nachas.
Thank you.
Did you ever investigate your genealogy? Somebody way back when must have davened really well to have such a wonderful great whatever granddaughter. Can I know how to super?
Well, I will tell you that Rabbi Alon Feldman always said that to my father. He's like, you need to, he's like, I wish I knew your lineage. I wish I knew your lineage. He was convinced that, because my father had like such an obvious Jewish neshama, he was convinced that there was some Jew in the line. My father does talk about like his mother being like a bit Spanishy and possibly maybe there was like a Marrano blood there. But you know what? Nowadays you have these genealogy kits. We really, really need to do that. Just he needs to take his, buy one of these kits and just do it, because we've always had this discussion.
But even from your mother's side, it's very possible that.
Well, my mother is Jewish. She's born Jewish.
I'm not even talking about Jewish. I'm talking about you must have come from talk about Yichud.
Oh,
Real Yichud.
Yes, Alex's great-grandmother was.
that's my mom.
My whole family back then, of course, were from, and there were rabbis. And hello, everybody that I know in Ramat Beit Shemesh. So they definitely, I always thank the grandmother that I'm named for, Rivka, because I know she davened for all of us. Hi, Faggy.
Hi, Beverly.
Any other questions?
Was that your
Hi,
grandmother?
Hi, I would just make a lovely comment for you, being that you were like between two worlds and all the different situations that you were going through. Baruch Hashem, you are a very well put together young woman. And it's like you didn't have any emotional difficulties because your parents really loved you and they let you be who you were.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most fantastic thing about your story also, besides about your father and when he met your mother with her gorgeous brown eyes. So I think that you're such a together person is what's so very important. And they get a lot of credit, your parents.
Absolutely. I say this so often, like my story is a story of how to become a Baal Tshuva, right? In terms of raising children, because nothing was ever imposed on me. I mean, I could tell you, there was one point where my mother was like, I didn't start wearing skirts until 11th grade. Nothing was forced down my throat. I was in a very, a school that didn't push things on me. Anything that I did to become more religious was my choice. That is a secret, but I will tell you, it's very, very, very hard to do that, because if we're putting our kids in the frum system, they don't have the choice, and it's not a bad thing that they don't have the choice. But this was a journey that I took next to them. They didn't make me do anything. And everything I decided was what I decided when I was ready to make that decision. I mean, I laugh. Like at one point, my mother, I remember when I was like 12 or 13. No, I'm sorry. I started wearing later. And she would be like pushing me to wear jeans because I look cute in jeans. I'm like, no, Mom, I don't want to wear jeans. Can you imagine? So, yeah.
Are you reading?
What upbringing did your mother have?
Can we see your
What?
Upbringing did your mother have?
So she was, my mother was completely secular. She went to a convent. I'm sharing the screen because someone asked me to. She had nothing. She had zero.
What was her mother?
She was a Scientologist. Totally not connected.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this was in May.
What did your father do to continue his journey afterwards?
So I think my father, I mean, he could answer that. Would you like to get him on the call and he could answer how he continues his journey?
Sure.
Yeah,
He's here.
Hi, how are you doing? I got tears rolling down my face. Well, I think that the whole trip, by the way, I gave this talk about 4 years ago to the Ramat Beit Shemesh community. So I think that it was when I'd been searching for 50 years, right? And that's when Alex so beautifully put, when the candy came around, I realized that where it had led me. But But I think it, and the rabbi would confirm this, I think it was utter joy. Every step was a joyful step. And I felt, you know, that that's my favorite word is joy. And it was, he said that, you know, you both came into Yiddishkeit with such joy that it influenced the whole community. And I think that now, I'm retired now and everything. And what I do is summarize basically my, 20 or 50 years really, 40 years of being Jewish in a form of what I call inspirational insights. And they're short, like one-page things. I have a reading list, list of reading. And they're really giving my observations on me being Jewish and my observations on being Jewish, on Jewish lifestyle. And so basically, that's what I do now. I'm summarizing in these weekly things. I put them out, and I get very good response to them. People say, "Well, I didn't see that way before." Well, that's what a convert does. So, and yeah, I learn obviously, and I still read Rabbi Samson Hirsch. He still gives me a thrill every time I read his lengthy commentaries. I can't believe it. You can see I'm an emotion person. But anyway, so it's still continuing. The journey's still continuing. And it's all a matter of getting close to now as God as humanly possible. And I recently wrote one about that. And I think that's my goal, is to really get there, get as close as I can as a human being to God.
You have a great chus. You have a tremendous chus, tremendous.
Absolutely amazing.
Very inspiring.
Thank
Beautiful.
you.
Beautiful.
I just want to thank you, Dad. It's so awesome to be able to do this together. I just wanted to share this with you all. You had Rabbi Rosenblatt on last time, am I correct?
Correct.
So this piece that's on the website right now about spiritual resilience is all about my experience working at HUK as an intern when I was 20, working with Rabbi Rosenblatt. And that was a summer that I went there to volunteer. And that was a summer that his wife, Alana Rosenblatt, passed away. So I wrote about my experience. So I'd love you all. I think it would be a nice tie-in to one of your last drops of inspiration to check out the article and read it.
Where is it?
So here it is on the website right now. I'm sorry, I forgot to share a screen. I keep doing this. Give me a minute. If you go to the website, oh gosh, hold on.
Are you putting it on the chat?
Yeah, I'm gonna put this here. I can put it on the chat. You share screen, put this here, share. Okay, at the bottom of the website, mishpacha.com, you'll see columnists, and just scroll around and you'll see Alexandra Fletcher. And this is this article about spiritual resilience, and it's about Rabbi Rosenblatt.
And it's a very good article, I can tell you.
Thank you.
Alex,
so yeah, drops of inspiration, you're doing the right thing.
Thank you so much for being a guest. Believe me, it was truly inspiring to listen to you and your father.
I just want to share that I'm from Atlanta and I belong to Beth Jacob. And my husband was the executive director there. We lived there 2006 to 2016 when we made Aliyah. So I know the community really well. I'm the day school and Rabbi Feldman.
Right. Yeah, we had left by then, but you know exactly what I'm talking about in terms of the warmth of the community, I'm sure.
Yes.
Okay, ladies, thank you so much.
All right.
Before we end.
Thank you.
So much, very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. You get the first guy.
Thank you so much.
A second, please. Just 1 second. Difficult for her with the baby, so I really appreciate you making the effort, Alex. And next week we have Rabbi Lazer Brody.
Wow.
La Havdil.
Fan of Garden of Emunah. And it's one of the books that changed my life. And if you haven't read it, go out and buy it. It's an amazing book. And we're gonna be having Rabbi Lazer Brody.
Kol hakavod.
Look forward to seeing you all next week. And thank you again, Alex. And thank you, Mr.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Have a
you.
wonderful evening.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Joyce,
Joyce.
it was great. 7 o'clock was a great time.
Beverly, I just want to say, Beverly, I just didn't realize it was your lovely daughter.
Oh, yeah.
And we stayed in your apartment when I came in, when I came to
Exactly.
Baltimore.
Exactly. It's lovely to see you, Rachel. I'm seeing all my old friends. I miss you all so much. Not being able to come to Israel. It's too terrible.
I hope you come soon. I didn't realize it was you. That's your lovely daughter who was talking
My
right up
lovely
until the very
daughter.
end.
My big
You're gonna be
brother.
so
That's who-
proud of her. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Miss
Lovely
you
to
very
see
much.
you, Rachel. God bless.
Lovely to see you.
Kodesh
Bye-bye.
But it's love, everybody.
Kol hakavod.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you so
Alex.
much.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.